Have a chair, my friend. We got a fire burning here.
Oh, that's great.
Starting to feel like fall.
It is, so it's the time of year.
In the summer, you're cooking on that. It's hotter than heck, but right now it's kind of welcoming.
It feels nice, yeah. That's
so
right.
This young fella has been at the Woodland Escape or Kelly Station a number of times, and but I'll reintroduce him, Gerry Neilands. Gerry, a pleasure.
Peter,
thanks for
always
coming.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me back.
Gerry is a storyteller, and he's got a fine wee bit of history to share with us today. So maybe to lead into this, I got thinking about, I really admire people that show unhuman events of stamina, if you would. And so we think, people ask, well, how come you don't have any Daniel Boones or Simon Kentons or Simon Gertys or on and on the list goes in Canada? So when you analyze that, you think, well, this was French Canada. Right. The French lost, and the victors write the story. So we don't have a lot of history there, and I guess maybe we're a wee bit modest too as Canadians. Yeah. But we do have our Daniel Boones, and this young fellow is going to relate a story today about that. But I think about people like the Mad Trapper. We did an episode on that. Superhuman endurance. It's just the 104th New Brunswick Regiment, February 1813, make a 770-mile trip in the dead of winter.
Yeah, snowshoes.
And they on snowshoes, one wool blanket, and they all survived. Yeah. You know, so the story we're going to hear today is a fellow by the name of Mr.
Robert Ramsey Livingston.
And he's got a fantastic story, and we've got a fantastic storyteller to relate.
Thank you.
Before you go down the rabbit hole of Mr. Livingston, I should point out that my friend Gerry is, well, when I'm sleeping, he's researching history. So this guy is obsessed with it. So he does the heavy lifting, I get to use it. He's always sending these great things to me, ledgers and all kinds of tidbits that are hard to find and uncover. And anyway, I digress. We should get on with Mr. Livingston.
Certainly. Well, Mr. Livingston was one of those fellows that, you know, was an unsung hero. There's many unsung heroes during the War of 1812, and Livingston was one of those. Fur trading out of Fort St. Joseph's on St. Joseph's Island, he was very close to his Indigenous customers and the fur traders, and he saw the profits that they were making. He wanted a piece of the pie. But of course, then the War of 1812 came along, and at that time in 1812, the American fort on Michilimackinac were unaware that war had begun.
Great story in itself.
It is. So an express canoe had come up from Montreal, with news of the war breaking out, with instructions for the commanding officer, Charles Roberts.
Charles Roberts.
Yeah. To
take Michilimackinac.
Take Michilimackinac. It was key. Mm-hmm. So with his band of 47 veteran soldiers and about 200 or 300 Indigenous warriors,
and a lot of freighter canoes,
and the fur traders, Livingston himself and other fur traders gathered as many men as they could, and they showed up at Mackinac and more or less knocked on the door and said, "We're here. War's been declared."
They also, in those canoes, though, they loaded a 6-pound cannon.
And they hauled that cannon up
on the top of the hill.
Yes, overlooking the fort. Yeah, if the numbers alone weren't enough to discourage a person, the cannon pointing directly into your backyard was. So.
Because as I understand it, when he knocks on the door of the fort and says surrender, and the guy goes, "Well, why would I do that?" And he points up the hill at the cannon.
Yeah.
Says, "Okay." Flag comes down.
Yeah.
British flag goes up.
That's exactly how it went. So poor Porter Hanks, who was the American commander, what could he do? So yeah, here's the keys to the fort, and surrendered without a shot being fired, and they were credited, or given credit, the British, for keeping the Indigenous warriors from causing any harm to the inhabitants and to the soldiers themselves. After that happened, Livingston was ordered by Roberts to escort the prisoners and the citizens that wouldn't swear an oath back down to Detroit, in the hopes that they could get the prisoners to Black Rock to be paroled. One of those citizens that were on that ship that Livingston escorted was a fur trader that Livingston had a debt with in Detroit. Bad timing.
Bad timing.
So away they jump on the schooner Mary and they travel down to Detroit. They come out of Lake St. Clair and they can almost see Sandwich. And the Americans, by this time, General Hall is there and he is aware that war has been declared. So he sees this ship and he fires a cannon shot across the bow. Come on in. So sure enough, they come into Detroit. What happens to Mr. Livingston? The trader that he was indebted to ran up to the sheriff. He got thrown into jail, into the fort. So of course he's there. Yeah, you know, he pleads that as a military man with military orders, war being declared,
he
should be exempt from any civil actions.
Right.
Well, Judge Woodward, well-known name in the Detroit area, begged to differ. So we're just going to hold you until we can figure out whether you're a British citizen, an American citizen, and just what's going on. So, of course, as time goes by, General Brock shows up with Tecumseh, and they decide to lay siege to Fort Detroit. And they start a cannon barrage. So now they're bombing, they're sending lobbing cannon shot into the fort. Livingston pens a note
He's
to Judge Woodward.
He's inside the fort.
For God's sakes, man.
Quit shooting.
Let me out of here. We're all going to be dead. Incarcerate me on the schooner that I came on down at the docks, but we're all going to be killed if we stay in this fort. And sure enough, poor Porter Hanks, who was taken prisoner and then liberated once they got to Detroit, gets hit by a cannonball and he's cut in half within the palisades of the fort. So, needless to say, Hall surrendered and Livingston is set free. 2
forts down, it's not going so well for the Americans.
No.
It's worth noting about Hall, before we go on with Mr. Livingston, that he was court-martialed, and his officers under him, they didn't want to surrender the fort. He's court-martialed. He is found not guilty, but he lives the rest of his life in shame. And back to Mr. Livingston.
Yeah. Well, after, of course, Mr. Livingston was liberated, and being an interpreter and with the British Indian Department, those fellows were in charge of coordinating the efforts with the Indigenous warriors from
all
the
their
different
allies.
nations. Yeah. He was sent back with correspondence and instructions back up to Fort St. Joseph's, just to keep them aware of how things were proceeding, that Detroit was taken. So now the British were looking more and more like they had control of that western district. So he travels back up there with information, and because of his skills with a canoe, the knowledge of the area and so on, he's being used as a courier as well.
Did he not canoe back?
He canoed
He didn't
back.
take a sloop or anything.
No,
He
didn't take the
They
schooner
paddled back all the way back to
That's right.
the North Shore of Lake Huron. Wow.
So he gets back to Fort St. Joseph's, and they send him back for the rest of 1812. He's constantly going from Fort St. Joseph's to Detroit, to Fort George, to that area, to keeping everybody informed and getting instructions so that everybody can coordinate the war effort in case the Americans again start an offensive and so on. By the winter of 1812, now 1813, we have the action at Frenchtown, the River Raisin. Livingston arrived from St. Joseph's in the winter, so now it's winter, so now he's walking
Snowshoe.
from St. Joseph's.
There was a lot of snow in that period.
Yes.
So he's on snowshoes.
Yes, no snow plows and pulling a toboggan. And what they were issued for equipment in regards to a shelter was generally a few yards of Russia sheeting. So canvas to make a little fly of some sort.
Single blanket.
You relied, a blanket, and you relied on your own skills to survive that weather, how to lay your fire and so on. So He arrives just after the river raisin episode, and he continues to bring that information back to Fort St. Joseph's, and the war carries on. By the spring of 1813
I'm thinking the man's tired.
Oh, goodness, he's just getting started. By the spring of 1813, now the Americans are making a concerted effort in the Niagara area. They're pushing over to Fort Erie, and they're making moves on Fort George. And of course, now there's a shortage of soldiers. De Rottenberg, the British general, he wants help from Lower Canada, but they are afraid to send any soldiers because of the chance of invasion. Yes. So Livingston is told to go down to Fort George, gather as many Indigenous warriors as you can along the Georgian Bay, so from the North Channel, from the French River and the Nottawasaga, and see if you can help out. Well, by the time he gets there, the Americans have taken Fort George, and they pushed the British back, but the British set up pickets close by. They want to keep an eye as close as they can on any American movements.
Yeah.
So Livingston, with his knowledge of Indigenous warfare and their language, he generally, when he went into battle or on excursions against the enemy, he would dress and paint as a warrior himself, and that's what he did late spring and summer when he was at Fort George. Unfortunately, in August of 1813, the Americans brought over a party to see if they could take some of these British pickets, and they had along with them a number of American Seneca warriors who were allied to the American forces, and a couple of those fellows that led them were Seneca by the name of Black Snake, his farmer's brother, and the Seneca, well-known Seneca chief corn planter, his son, Henry O'Bale. So what happened was, they know that these American forces are coming towards them. Livingston and the rest, John Norton, Chief Jean-Baptiste Saganac, the Ottawa, he was with them. Robert Keir was with them. They went out to meet these Americans, unbeknownst that there was Seneca warriors with them.
Yeah.
So Livingston and the group he was with got a little too far ahead of everybody, and these Seneca started yelling and hooting and hollering and waving at them to come forward, and they mistook those warriors as British allied warriors, and they ran right into an ambush.
Captured.
So they're in quite a pickle. They find themselves surrounded, and the Seneca open fire on them, and many fall dead. Livingston himself takes a musket ball to his leg, and that knocks him down, and as soon as he falls and the rest of the members of his party, some are being shot, the Seneca rush towards them, right? They generally fire a volley, rush forward with their tomahawks.
They like up close and personal battle.
So Livingston finds himself on the ground, surrounded, and he tries to defend himself as best he can. And a fellow runs up to him and hits him in the face with the tomahawk, striking him in the right eye. That leaves him, that right eye pretty much, it's blind. He's all but blind. Now that he can't see, he falls to the ground. Another warrior runs up and stabs him in the shoulder with a spear.
He's having a bad day.
Moves again, and the same fella takes another jab at him, strikes him in the head and cracks his skull. And then the war chiefs bring it to a stop, and they collect their prisoners, and Livingston's one of them. And they haul these fellas in on what was a common piece of equipment called a prisoner's halter. So the halter goes around their neck and they're let in. And of course, they bring these British captives, Livingston and the rest of his party, into Old Fort Niagara. And it's an interesting thing. After every skirmish or battle, the two warring parties would little white flag of truce, trying to get the names of anybody that was taken prisoner, who was killed, so that they could exchange information. And de Rottenberg, the British general, finds out that Livingston has been taken captive. Another British Indian Department captain from Lower Canada, Jean-Baptiste Delormier, he's been captured as well. But he finds out about Livingston and the severity of his wounds. Now, this sets up a back and forth between General Boyd, the American commander, and de Rottenberg, because when Livingston was brought in, he was dressed and painted as a native. So he's with the rest of the warriors, and they were treated much differently than regular British soldiers.
Yes, for sure.
General Hull at Detroit had made a proclamation, and one of the parts of that proclamation stated, any British citizen found fighting beside an Indian, dressed or painted, will suffer the same fate, and that'll be permanent extermination. So here's Livingston.
It's a gentleman way of putting it.
Yes.
We're going to execute you.
Yeah, we're going to actually, yes. So General Boyd hears tell of this, and he goes to see for himself. So he goes up to Livingston, and he says to Mr. Livingston, "Are you native or are you white?" Now, Livingston is making his career in the fur trade dealing with Indigenous people. He speaks the language, he knows the custom, he understands the warrior culture. He's gathered all these warriors from around Georgian Bay, telling them what great victories they'll have fighting with the British and the rewards they'll get. If he says he's white, then he knows he's going to be removed and separated with the British. So he looks at General Boyd and he says, "Un sauvage," answers him in French, "I'm Indian." And General Boyd says, "So be it." So he's left there with the Indians, with his
festering wounds, I'm thinking.
Yeah, okay. And General de Rottenberg, of course, protests again about the condition and the things that he's being subjected to. And so Boyd has no choice but to remove him. Livingston himself says in his memoirs and petition that his wounds were not attended to until they were completely swarming with worms or maggots.
I don't wonder how it's humanly possible to survive. I mean, anyway, I digress. Carry on, sir.
It's interesting. His name was Robert Ramsey Livingston, but to his Indigenous friends, he was known as the Fox. He was called the Fox. I don't know whether it was because he was as clever as a fox, but he certainly was one of those fellas that could get knocked down, but given enough time would get back up again.
Yeah, obviously.
So poor Livingston is suffering with these wounds, and time goes by. He's captured in August. By October, he escapes, whether by himself or with a group, but he manages to get across the Niagara River, and he's a week in what would be the woods, making his way to Burlington Heights to the British, or to the front lines of the British, where he's found and he's taken in, and his wounds
Get some medical attention.
Yes.
Finally.
Yeah.
Remarkable. But it doesn't end there.
No.
So it's hard to fathom. Livingston is back in the British lines. If we think about the war and where it's progressed, we've got Tecumseh is dead, Proctor's in charge, he's in retreat. It's going a lot better for the Americans than to follow those first two forts.
Indeed.
But Livingston, you think with all those wounds, that'd be it for him, pack it in. His work's just about to begin.
He's not finished yet, that's for sure. He's getting the medical care and he's recovering, and by the spring of 1814, with a little recommendation from Colonel Matthew Elliott, who was in charge of the British Indian Department at Fort Malden, he suggests that Livingston escort Colonel MacDougall and his party to Michilimackinac to take over from the leadership of the commander that was up there. Of course, Livingston, knowing the different portages, trails, and so on, he's a good pick. So that's what he does. He leaves Burlington Heights, and he makes his way up to the little place off of Kempenfelt Bay on Lake Simcoe, where modern-day Barrie is, called the Willow, Fort Willow.
Fort Willow,
yes.
yeah. In the middle of the long portage.
The 9-mile portage, it was called.
Yeah.
But that is a trail and portage that takes you up to Georgian Bay. So when he's out there, he meets Colonel MacDougall, and they get to work making some bateaux, which are flat-bottom boats, and they make their way down the Nottawasaga River.
We did that once, for real.
We did.
Remember that time? We were
Yes.
pushing those bateaux off of sandbars.
We were.
I get away from our story, but we in a birch bark canoe.
In a bark canoe. And he leads MacDougall and that group along the shoreline of Georgian Bay, the North Channel, up to Mackinac, where he takes command, and he's sent back and forth with correspondence. Again, that seems to be his forte. And sure enough, now in the summer of 1814, the Americans have taken control of the Western District. They took back Detroit. They've got the Battle of Lake Erie. They've got control of the upper Great Lakes.
And all the supply chain through the Great Lake Basin is now American.
That's right. And the British at Mackinac are in threat of being cut off from supplies because Americans have control of the lake. But there's one British schooner left, the Nancy. Exactly. So in the summer of 1814, the Americans are hot to get that last
They were obsessed.
supply ship.
Not hot. They
certainly
were obsessed with getting that
They
little
were.
ship.
Yeah. So they went up into the Great Lakes, and sure enough, they were spotted. And the Nancy had just made a trip from Mackinac to the mouth of the Nottawasaga to get supplies for the fort.
They needed firewood too.
Well,
For their stoves, right?
So yeah. So MacDougall says to Livingston, he orders him, jump in your canoe with a select set of paddlers, paddle down to the Nottawasaga and warn the Nancy that the Americans are on the lake. They're in the bay. They're looking for her.
2 ships of war.
Do whatever you
searching
got to
for
do.
it.
Yes. So the commander of the Nancy at that time is a fellow by the name of Lieutenant Miller Worsley. So they haul the Nancy 2 miles up.
As far as the draft would allow.
As far as they could up the river, and you've been there, we've been there. And at that time we have to remember the trees are all 120 feet tall. So the Americans have captured, when they got onto the lakes, they made the rounds up to Mackinac and so on. They captured a fur trading ship called the Mink, and from that crew they discovered where the Nancy was going to be at the mouth of the Nottawasaga. So they traveled down there, but they couldn't see Nancy wasn't there, so they thought they'd just wait there for it. They sent a crew in to get firewood, and they discovered, they looking through the trees in the creek, saw the mast of the ship. So now they start
lobbing hot
shots over the treetops. And
captain of the ship burns it, Nancy.
Yes,
Torches
Miller Worsley, instead of giving up that ship and the supplies to the Americans, they burn it. They set fire to their little blockhouse, and the story goes that the powder charge ran to the Nancy, and it caught fire and burned to the waterline. So the Americans, of course, have got what they think they wanted. The Nancy's out of commission. They cut trees down to block the river, so they can't possibly get another ship through. If they could save the Nancy, which they couldn't. Livingston and Worsley, they go back upstream towards Fort Willow, where they had some other bateau anyway. So a few weeks later, they slink out. They get their bateau back to the mouth of the Nottawasaga. Worsley and his crew, Livingston in his birch bark canoe, and they make their way back around the bay up to Michilimackinac.
Before you carry on, it's worth noting that over a 200-year period, the Nancy, which is sunk, and there's a lot of silt coming down the Nottawasaga River, and it starts to build up over the hull, and it creates Nancy Island.
The literal island.
And you and I have spent many a campfire on that island.
Yep.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
for
Anyway,
sure.
carry on with the story.
Well, they get onto the lake. They know they've got these supplies for the fort, so they've got to try and get to the fort at Mackinac. But they know that there's at least 2 American ships still on the lake, looking for not only other British ships, or they're also looking for the fur traders' traps coming, pelts being brought down from the interior, because there was an estimated $1 million worth of furs that were coming down at that same time, and they thought that's a nice prize. So anyway, they get up to around the St. Joseph's area, and they see the Scorpion, the American ships, the Scorpion and the Tigress. But it's a dark, dark night, and they pass within 100 yards of those ships and get to Mackinac to relieve to relieve the fort. And then Livingston has this idea. He's feeding Worsley all these ideas. You know, if we snuck past these 2 ships, they don't know where we are. They think we've run back down to York. They don't know that we've made it to Mackinac. We could take those 2 ships. We could surprise them. So Worsley, of course, he shares the idea with Colonel MacDougall. MacDougall says, if you think you can do it,
Let's do it.
let's do it. So again, these happy band of brigands jump in their little bateaus and canoes, and they paddle out, and they find the Tigress, and they wait for still black night, and they paddle up to it. They capture it with very little opposition. So they've captured 1 ship. So what do? They keep the American flag flying, and they take all the coats off the American sailors
And put them on.
and put them on.
And the deck.
And man the deck. So sure enough, a day or 2 later, they spot the Scorpion, and they decide to weigh anchor. They've got wind in their favor. They weigh anchor, and slowly makes their way towards the Scorpion, closer and closer, and the crew on the Scorpion are just scrubbing the deck, and it's the Tigress.
No big
No
deal.
big deal. Then it's getting closer and closer, and I wonder what they're doing. Now they're within, a couple rods lengths, and
Perfect cannon range.
perfect cannon range. But what are you guys doing? Before you know it, the Tigress is right beside the Scorpion, and all these British soldiers run it, jump out of the hull and across, and the Scorpion is captured as well. So they've captured 2 American ships. They lost the Nancy,
Ships
but
of
they
war.
captured.
These are big ships.
They had cannon. They were equipped with cannon, and the British immediately renamed them the Tigress. They named Surprise, and the Scorpion they renamed the Confiance, because it was confined, I guess, by them quickly.
Perfect names.
So now they've got control of the upper lake again, and they can use those ships to bring supplies from the mouth of the Nottawasaga to Mackinac, and Colonel MacDougall and the rest of the troops.
It's worth
at the
noting
fort.
they're avoiding Detroit in the lower area
Yes.
where the Americans have control,
Yes.
and they're doing that long 9-mile portage,
Yes.
and to get furs to out and et cetera,
Get
supplies in.
Yeah. Flour and so on. Yeah, for sure.
It's still not over, but we are getting closer to the end of this war
Yes.
of neither side winning, I guess was a
Yes.
good way to put it. But where do we go from here? What's Mr. Livingston up to now?
Well, Mr. Livingston, once again, is put in charge of taking the prisoners down to York, modern-day Toronto, and then on to Kingston. So that's what he does. This is now September, October. It's in the fall of 1814.
Paddling hard.
Paddling hard. So down he goes, and he does his job, but he runs into a little snag with the superintendent of the Indian Department from that region, William Klaus. And William Klaus was a nephew to John Johnson, and that was his uncle, and grandfather to Sir William Johnson.
Sir William, yeah.
Yeah, so he's so that the connection there. Klaus wanted him to take some paperwork back with him to another spot, and Livingston had other things on his mind. And I forgot to mention, during some of these episodes, he also made trips to Montreal, to headquarters.
Just a little side trip.
Just a little side trip to Montreal.
In a birch
So
bark
there's
canoe.
some suggestion that he may have been doing some work for Sir George Prevost as well, because he comes back to Mackinac in October after taking the prisoners down, and he asked for a leave of absence for the winter to go to Montreal. He had his girlfriend was in Montreal, so he asked for a leave of absence, and MacDougall didn't blink an eye. And Colonel MacDougall was not a very nice gentleman. Very few people got along with him.
He knew the value of Livingston had demonstrated.
Well, I think it was more a social class thing. He butted heads with Livingston. He butted heads with the well-known fur trader John Askin. He didn't like the first naval commander that they sent to man the Nancy, so he had him replaced with Miller Worsley, because the first fellow wouldn't take orders because he was he was also a lieutenant colonel, so he didn't have to take orders from somebody that was the same rank.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what Livingston does, but he's got to leave with the last canoes going to Montreal, and he has to come back in the spring, in March. So that's what he does. He goes to Montreal, and in January he gets married to a woman by the name of Jane McKercher, and he gets married in the St. Gabriel Presbyterian Church. It's a Scottish church, and if Fort William was the largest or the huge trade center for the Northwest Company, then St. Gabriel's in Montreal is its religious counterpart.
Right.
Because the church was founded on at least 24 Northwest Company fur trader partners. So he gets married, comes back in March, and he's got a fellow along with him by the name of William McKay. William McKay was a former fur trader, and now he's with the Indian Department. So the two of them take a sleigh from Montreal to Kingston to York, and then they walk from York, Toboggan to Mackinac.
Good Lord.
In March of...
It's like I said at the onset of this conversation, the feats that are just, it's like Shackleton. It's like just feats that seem humanly impossible.
Yeah. So they get up to Mackinac, and they bring us supplies with them and so on, correspondence. And at the same time, now we're into the spring of 1815, and the war's over. So
except for those folks in New Orleans.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. But so the war is over, and now because they've got all these extra people hired for the Indian Department, Livingston being one of them, now everybody's concerned about losing their job. And Livingston is also, that's a concern. So he starts penning petitions, because as a military participant during the war, he will be entitled to a land grant. And he also applies for a permanent job with the Indian Department, but Colonel MacDougall doesn't think he's worthy because of his unsavory trading as fur trading deals and
more native than white.
Yeah, so to speak. So 1815 comes along, the war is over. He also applies for a pension because of his injuries. So in October of 1815, he's writing a letter from the Neptune Inn in Quebec, and he's going for a medical examination by the British military doctors. And they examine him, and they write that, yes, he's had a few wounds. He seems to have taken a tomahawk blow to the eye, which has left him pretty well blind in that eye. He's also had a cracked skull from a spear wound. But all in all, he's really not entitled to a king's pension for the rest of his life, but he should be given perhaps a year's wages in lieu of his injuries. So,
and that's how it was summed up.
And that's how it was summed up.
Do we know where his land grant is? Where does he go?
Yes, he had a land grant for a little place called Whitchurch over by modern-day Stouffville.
Okay.
And whether or not he kept it is hard to say, because he never settled there. He always kept Montreal as his base, because after the War of 1812, he got hired on with Lord Selkirk to escort those immigrants that were going to colonize the Red River district. So he again continued traveling nonstop.
It's hard to fathom Mr. Livingston being a farmer.
Yes. Oh no, he was no. No.
Maybe there's no record of it, but I'm sure
No.
he didn't keep that 160-acre parcel
No.
very long.
No, not at all. He hired with Selkirk. In the meantime, he'd come home and just enough to make sure they had another child born, and continued that for some time. And then again in 1827, the BID, the head of the BID in Lower Canada, passed away. We find Livingston applying for that job again.
He didn't get it though.
Unfortunately, William McKay got it, the fellow that he escorted back.
An immigrant from the
before.
States. They didn't like him down
No.
there. He decided to side on the British side.
So,
right?
so at the same time, there was a cholera epidemic going through Montreal, and Livingston caught cholera and he died.
Passed away.
Yeah.
I must say, Gerry, as a storyteller, you never disappoint.
Well, thank you.
That was a grand story and a great, I guess, summary of the man.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe before we go, could we have a look at your powder horn there?
Sure.
So, Gerry and I have a common friend, Robert Wiggins, and he's an extraordinarily good scrimshaw. And you can see, Gerry, you commissioned this to have
Yes.
Robert build this.
Yes.
So we got Robert Livingston. Now there's a reference to a number of miles down here. Is that an estimate of how many the man
It's an
traveled?
estimate of how many miles he traveled during the war.
8,890 miles on
Yes.
foot and canoe.
Foot and canoe and maybe the odd boat.
That's pretty amazing. And we've got scale map of the Great Lakes here. I'm thinking Niagara Peninsula.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that the flag would mark.
Yes, in the area, the British pickets in around Fort George, where Livingston and his friends were captured, was at a skirmish at fellows at a farm by the name of Jacob Ball.
Ball, yeah.
So Ball's farm.
That's where the map or the flag
So
would
that's where he was
indicate.
captured.
Fascinating. Well, Gerry, it's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure for me as well.
You're welcome at Kelly Station anytime.
Oh, thank you.
Before you leave, though, what do you think about a bite to eat?
That sounds pretty good.
I'm a wee bit peckish.
Yeah, myself as well.